The chief of emergency medicine at Mercy Cross Medical Center thought leaving a nurse alone with 5 chemical plant victims was a way to prove a point. He proved one, just not the one he intended. Welcome to Hidden Badges Stories. I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time finding this channel, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. We've got people tuning in from all over the country, and I read every single one. Now settle in, because what happened inside Mercy Cross on the night of the Hargrove plant explosion is something the staff there still talk about in low voices. This is the story of Willa Strand. She had worked nights at Mercy Cross for 2 years, 36 years old. Bright blue scrubs that had been washed so many times the color had softened at the elbows. Brown hair kept short, cut straight across the back of her neck. Hazel eyes that she tended to aim at the floor during department meetings, not because she was absent-minded, but because she had learned, carefully and at some cost, that certain rooms rewarded silence more than sense. Dr. Cole Rafferty was the reason for that lesson. He had been chief of emergency medicine for 4 years, long enough to have redesigned the department in his own image. Loud where it needed to be quiet, smooth where it needed to be honest. He wore his credentials the way some men wore cologne, applied too heavily and impossible to ignore. He had twice tried to have Willa's performance reviewed on the grounds that she was not a collaborative presence. Both reviews found nothing. Both times, Rafferty had been angrier about the absence of a finding than he would have been about a reprimand. She filed safety concerns, that was the other thing. 3 and 6 months, routed through the hospital's anonymous reporting portal. Inadequate triage staffing. Delayed medication response in 2 overnight codes. A supply shortage in the burn bay that had gone unreported for 11 days. The reports went in. Nothing came back. But someone had traced them to her anyway. And Rafferty had started calling her our most concerned employee, with a smile that did not travel above his jawline. The night of November 14th started at 11 minutes to 11 with a call from Hargrove Chemical, 2 miles east on Industrial Boulevard. Partial detonation in the catalyst processing unit. 5 workers en route, multiple inhalation injuries. 1 pediatric, transferred from the plant perimeter where firefighters had found him. The ER was running 4 nurses and 2 residents. Standard Thursday overnight. Weekend staff had been cut 2 months earlier, approved by the board, justified by numbers that did not include the nights when the numbers stopped mattering. Rafferty arrived through the ambulance bay doors in his coat, and his lanyard and his expression of controlled authority. He had been at a hospital foundation dinner on the 4th floor, the kind of dinner where the chicken was dry and the promises were not. He stood at the charge desk and looked at the incoming board. 5 critical? He said it as though he was questioning a choice someone else had made. Luz Pereira, charge nurse on shift, nodded. Chemical burns, inhalation, blast trauma, ETF 4 minutes on the first 2. Rafferty looked at the board, then at the staff. His gaze found Willa, who was already pulling supply carts toward the bays. Nurse Strand. His voice carried the particular quality of a man who liked being heard across rooms. You've been very vocal lately, about triage protocol, about staffing, about how the night shift is managed. He paused to let that gather weight. Tonight you'll have the chance to demonstrate your vision. You'll coordinate incoming for all 5. Residents Kimura and Patel will assist. He looked at them. Observe carefully. Then he looked at a hospital administrator named Foley, who had followed him down from the dinner and stood near the double doors, holding a glass of water he hadn't finished. The board wants accountability. Let's give it to them. No one laughed, but Rafferty smiled in the way that didn't require anyone else to. He walked back toward the elevator. The doors opened. He stepped in. Willa watched the elevator numbers count upward. Then she turned to the bays. Bay 1 gets inhalation trauma. Bay 2 gets the shrapnel injury. Bay 3 gets blast trauma, suspected internal bleed. Bay 4 gets crush injury. Bay 5 stays clear for the pediatric. Dr. Ned Kimura, 2nd-year resident, 27 years old and still carrying the habit of looking for permission before moving, blinked. Who's lead? I am, Willa said. She said it the same way she said everything, without decoration. But Kimura noticed that the sentence didn't leave room for a question inside it. The first ambulance came through the bay doors at 11:02 p.m. His name was Dale Hutchins, 52, plant foreman, 31 years on the job. He had been running toward the catalyst unit when the pressure valve gave. His airway had taken the vapor directly. His oxygen saturation read 79 and was moving in the wrong direction. The paramedic, a woman named Reyes, shook her head as they rolled him in. Lost it twice en route. He's got maybe 1 clean attempt left before the swelling locks everything shut. Kimura reached for the standard laryngoscope. Willa's hand closed on his wrist before it touched the tray. Not hard, just certain. Swelling is too far advanced, she said. You'll waste your only window. She looked at Kimura without impatience. Get me the crick kit, bottom right drawer. Not the surgical tray, the kit. He got it. She had it open before he turned back around. What happened next, Kimura would describe later to anyone who asked, and many who didn't. Her hands moved with a quality he couldn't name at first. Not fast exactly, though they were fast. Precise in a way that looked like it cost nothing. Like she had done this before in a place where pausing to think was not an option anyone survived. The airway opened. Dale Hutchins's chest rose, his saturation 84, 88, 91. Reyes, still in the bay, stared. What was that? Behind the supply cart, a nurse named Bex whispered, "She restocks every bay on night shift. She knows where everything is." That was true. It was not the answer. Bay 2 held Gracie Torrance, 24 years old, lab technician at Hargrove, blast shrapnel along the inner thigh, a junctional bleed. The kind that did not wait politely for a trauma surgeon. Her phone sat in a sealed bag on the rolling table. The screen kept lighting up. The word on it was Mom, repeated like a question that already knew the answer it needed. Willa worked Gracie's injury with both hands, guiding Kimura's placement with instructions that gave him just enough to follow without making him feel stupid for needing them. She didn't raise her voice when his first attempt was off. She corrected the angle, said there, and let him feel the difference. The bleeding slowed. The phone lit up again. "Mom." "Answer it," Willa said. Kimura looked up. "Me?" "Put it on speaker. Tell her Gracie is alive and fighting. Tell her to drive carefully in the rain and come to the ER entrance." He picked up the phone with one gloved hand. His voice shook slightly when the call connected. "Mrs. Torrance? This is Mercy Cross Medical Center. Gracie is with us. She's alive." A sound came through the line that wasn't words yet. Just a mother's breath recognizing that the worst thing had not happened yet. Willa kept both hands exactly where they were and did not look at the screen. Rafferty appeared at the bay window at 11:18. He did not come in. He stood with his hands in his coat pockets and his head tilted in the posture of a man assessing something he already had an opinion about. "Nurse Strand." His voice came through the glass partition. "You are not authorized to direct surgical intervention." Willa did not turn around. "Then find someone who is authorized and send them in. You have about 90 seconds before that option closes." He did not send anyone. He walked away. Kimura looked at the monitor, at Gracie's pressure, which was improving by slow degrees. He looked at the bay window where Rafferty had been standing. "Does he do that a lot?" he asked quietly. Luz, crossing behind him with a blood product bag, said, "Tonight more than usual." Bay 3 was Manny Ochoa, 44, maintenance crew lead, blast trauma. Blood pressure low enough that Willa assigned Patel to him with clear instructions and checked back every 4 minutes. Bay 4 held Opal Kinsey, 67, retired plant safety inspector who had come back as a volunteer the previous spring and had been directing the evening evacuation when the second pressure event knocked her into a loading dock wall. Crush injury to both legs. Possible compartment syndrome developing in her left. Willa moved between bays with the kind of economy that did not announce itself. No wasted motion, no raised voice. She updated the board in her own handwriting. She told Bex what to pull before Bex asked. She noticed when Patel's hand started to shake and positioned herself close enough that he could see her without needing to ask for steadiness out loud. Opal watched Willa from Bay 4 with the particular attention of someone who had spent a career learning to read systems before they failed. "You've done this before," Opal said. Her voice was dry and careful, the voice of a woman who measured words and found most of them wanting. "I'm a nurse," Mrs. Kinsey, Willa said, adjusting the pressure sleeve on Opal's leg. "I do this every shift." "That's not what I mean." Opal's eyes moved to Willa's hands and then back to her face. "My son did 3 tours with the 10th Mountain. He said they could always tell, after a while, who had worked in the bad places. Something about how a person carries themselves when things go sideways, like they've stopped being surprised by everything, so nothing can surprise them in particular." Willa checked the monitor, did not answer. "You don't have to tell me," Opal said, "but you didn't flinch when that first monitor dropped. You just moved." Bay 5 opened at 11:31. The boy's name was Mason Ochoa, 9 years old, Manny's son. He had waited at home until 9 o'clock. 2 hours passed when his father was supposed to be back from his shift. Then he had ridden his bicycle to the plant, which was 3 miles and 1 creek bridge from their house, and had been found by a firefighter sitting against the outer perimeter fence in the low chemical fog that had settled there, because those vapors always settled low. He was pale, his nail beds had gone blue at the edges. His blood pressure when Bex got it was wrong in 2 directions at once. Willa set down the chart she was holding. She walked to Bay 5. She pulled a stool next to the gurney and sat so she was level with the boy, not above him, level. "Mason." She said his name the way you say a name when you need someone to know you mean exactly them and no one else. His eyelids moved. "I need you to do one thing for me, just one. Blink if you can hear me." a slow blink, like a door opening by an inch. "Good," she said. "That's the job, you just keep doing that." Behind her, Kimura was already pulling the correct medication tray without being told. Bex had the warming blanket unfolded. Patel had stepped back to give room without anyone asking him to. The room had reorganized itself around the child in Bay 5 without a single raised voice. The way rooms reorganized around people who knew what they were doing. That was when the lights went out. 3 seconds of complete dark. The kind of dark that makes a person aware of every sound a human body makes when it's afraid. Emergency power came back in strips. Bay 1, Bay 2, Bay 3, Bay 4 flickered. Bay 5 came back last, and when the monitor lit up, Mason's saturation had dropped 4 points. Willa was already adjusting the oxygen flow. Rafferty returned at 11:47 with the administrator, Foley, and a woman named Dr. Haverford, hospital chief medical officer, who had not known until 20 minutes ago that the 5 Hargrove patients had been assigned to a single nurse. She did not look like she was enjoying what she was learning. Rafferty moved to the center of the ear the way some men move into rooms, as though the room had been waiting for them. "I'll take command from here," he said. "Nurse Strand, step back and document." Willa was at Mason's side. She did not step back. "These patients were admitted under my coordination 46 minutes ago," she said. "Their lines, their blood products, their airway decisions are all cross-referenced in the chart. Any handoff now costs time none of them have. I am the attending physician." "Then attend." She looked at him for the first time all night. "Pick a bay, any bay, there are 5 of them, go be a doctor." The administrator, Foley, made a sound that was not quite a word. Dr. Haverford looked at Rafferty, then at the board, then at the 5 names listed in Willa's handwriting, all still live and updating. She did not tell Willa to step back. Rafferty turned to Kimura, away from the cameras, voice low and flat. "Document scope violations. Every procedure she initiated without a direct physician order. I want it in the chart by midnight." Kimura looked at him. Then he looked at Bay 2, where Gracie Torrance's pressure had been reading stable for the first time in 40 minutes. Then he looked back at Rafferty. "No," Kimura said quietly, like it wasn't a difficult word, just a true one. The doors opened at 12:09 a.m. 2 people came in from the rain, a man in army dress greens with sergeant major's chevrons and a woman in a federal identification jacket carrying a sealed envelope. Behind them, security. The sergeant major's name was Wade Ferris. He was stationed at Wright-Patterson, 40 minutes east. He had been routed to Mercy Cross after an emergency dispatch communication flagged a tactical airway technique on a civilian patient that matched a protocol specific to combat medical training, a protocol that had not been formally published in any civilian manual. He stopped inside the doors. He scanned the room the way soldiers scan rooms, not for threats but for exits and faces. His eyes found Willa at Bay 5. He said, "Denker." The ER went quiet in the particular way that happens when a single word lands somewhere it clearly belongs. Rafferty, who had positioned himself near the charge desk, blinked. "What did you just say?" Ferris didn't answer him. He was still looking at Willa. Staff Sergeant Willa Strand, the woman in the federal jacket, said, opening the envelope, "Army 68 Whiskey, 82nd Airborne Division, 4 deployments, 2 Army Commendation Medals, 1 Silver Star earned in Kandahar Province." She turned 1 page, separated honorably, 2019. Reason cited, adjustment to civilian practice. Rafferty said, "That is impossible. She's a bedside nurse." Luz Pereira set down the bag she'd been holding. "She's a nurse who spent the last hour keeping 5 critical patients alive while you were at a dinner party." Her voice was even. She had been waiting to say it for at least 40 minutes. "So?" Dr. Haverford looked at Rafferty. He straightened his coat. Whatever her background, she operated outside the scope of a registered nurse and potentially endangered. "I have that on video," said a woman from the waiting area. Everyone turned. She was sitting near the triage window. Dark jacket, press badge from the Dayton Register on her lanyard. She had been there since 10:15 with her sister, who'd come in with a sprained wrist and been processed through fast track. She had started recording when Rafferty made his announcement in the Bay corridor, not for any particular reason. Just the habit of 20 years in local journalism, which was that when a man in an expensive coat performs for an audience, you keep your phone steady. "I have the timestamp," she said. "I have you walking out, I have you laughing." She looked at Rafferty with the calm of someone who filed public records requests for a living. "The corridor is a semi-public space. I checked before I said anything." Rafferty took 1 step toward her. Willa was between them before he completed it. Not quickly, not dramatically, she was simply there. "No," she said. Just the 1 word. He stopped. Possibly because of the word. Possibly because of the way she was standing when she said it. The way a person stands when they have stopped calculating whether the other person is going to be reasonable. That footage stays with her, Willa said, and you walk out with security right now. The two security guards looked at each other, then at Rafferty. Then at the board where 5 names were still updating in Willa's handwriting. They walked Rafferty to the administrative hallway. He was still talking when the doors closed behind him. At 12:22 a.m., Manny Ochoa's pressure stabilized. The surgical team took him from Bay 3 with a clean handoff. At 12:31, Gracie Torrance's mother arrived at the ER entrance, rain-soaked and shaking. Willa met her at the door, held the woman's arm for one moment, and said, "Gracie is alive, she's asking for you. Walk with me." Gracie was not yet conscious enough to ask for anything. But her mother walked steadily through the doors. Mason Ochoa's saturation came up slowly, the way children's bodies sometimes reclaimed lost ground as though insisting on the right to. By 12:45, his nail beds had pink back in them. He had not spoken since the single blink, but when Willa checked his pupils, he tracked her penlight with both eyes. Clear, following. "There you go," she said quietly. "Your dad is in surgery. He's going to need you to be the one who stayed." His lips moved, not words, just acknowledgement, the way a person signals they heard something true even before they can answer it. In Bay 4, Opal Kinsey reached for Willa's wrist as she passed. "I knew it," Opal said. Willa stopped. Knew what? The quiet ones. They're always the ones who've seen the most. Opal's grip was firmer than her injury suggested she should have managed. "My son came home from his 3rd tour different. Not broken. Just used up differently. The way people get when they've spent too long in places where their particular skill is the only thing standing between someone living and someone not." She studied Willa's face. "Did yours come home?" Willa was quiet for a moment. "Some did," she said, "not all." Opal's hand relaxed. "No, never all." She closed her eyes. "Thank you for what you did tonight, not just for these people, for not pretending you couldn't." Willa adjusted the blanket over Opal's legs with a care that was not performed. Then she moved to the board. Ferris fell into step beside her. "Command's been asking about you." "I know. They want you back in some capacity. Training, at minimum. The protocol work from Kandahar is still being used in the 75th. Willa looked at the board. 5 names. All still updating. "Tell them I appreciate it." "Is that a no?" She looked at Kimura, who was writing honest chart notes with both hands and not looking up to see if anyone approved. At Luz, who was already prepped for the next call before it came. At Bex, who had labeled every supply drawer in Bay 5 in marker large enough to read from across the room. "It's a not yet," she said. "There's still work here." Ferris nodded once. "Unker." She looked at him. "For what it's worth," he said. "You never stopped being worth calling." She didn't answer that, but she didn't look away either. Willa gave her formal statement at 2 a.m. in a room off the administrative wing, where a federal health investigator had set up a temporary desk. She gave her full name, her rank, her deployments. She described, in sequence, every clinical decision she had made between 11/2 and 12/9. She was asked whether she had felt qualified to make them. She said yes. She was asked whether she had performed them to prove something. She said no. She had performed them because no one else was there and patients were dying, and those were the only 2 facts that had mattered. She was asked if she regretted stepping in. No, she said, not for 1 second. Rafferty resigned before the board could vote. His letter cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. The language men used when the alternative was being removed in front of an audience. The Office of Inspector General investigation into the buried safety complaints ran parallel to the journalist's story, which published on a Tuesday and was shared 40,000 times by Friday. 3 of the complaints had pointed to coverage gaps tied to budget decisions made with Rafferty's approval. One of them might have changed an outcome from 8 months earlier that the hospital had recorded incorrectly, as showing no deviation from standard care. That case was reopened. 2 months after the Hargrove night, Mason Ochoa came back to Mercy Cross with his father Manny, who was walking slowly but walking. Manny's gait had a new tilt to it, the permanent kind that comes from scar tissue rearranging the mechanics of a person. But he was there, one hand resting on his son's shoulder. Mason looked around the ER. He was wearing a jacket too big for him and carrying a folded piece of paper. "Is the nurse here?" he asked Bex. "The one from the plant night?" Bex went to find her. Willa came out from Bay 3 with a chart in her hand. She crouched when she reached Mason, so they were the same height. "Hey," she said, "you look better." He considered this seriously. "My dad says you're the reason he's here." "Your dad did the harder part," Willa said. "He stayed." Mason handed her the paper. It was a hospital drawn in crayon, slightly lopsided, with 5 small figures in blue positioned in separate bays, and 1 larger figure standing at the center of the floor. Not doing anything dramatic, just standing there facing the room. "That's you," he said, pointing to the center figure. "I made you in blue because that's what you were wearing." Willa looked at the drawing for a moment, at the 5 figures in their bays, at the one in the center who held no weapon, wore no uniform, carried no visible sign of what she'd been through or what she knew, just standing in the middle of the room as though that was exactly where she intended to be. "Can I keep this?" "I made it for you." She folded it carefully and put it in her front scrub pocket. Mason looked at her with the directness that 9-year-olds had, which was unfiltered and therefore often more accurate than what adults managed. "Are you going to stay here, or go back to the army?" "I'm going to stay here for now," Willa said. "Good," he said, "because what if something else happens?" She stood up. "Then we'll handle it." He nodded, satisfied with that in the way children were satisfied with true things. He took his father's hand and they walked toward the exit, Manny's new gate giving each step a slight pause before the next. Willa watched them go. A sign had gone up above the charge desk 2 weeks earlier, approved by the new interim chief who had asked Willa what it should say. She had said she didn't know, he had put it up anyway. 4 lines. "Every patient has a name, every night shift matters. No concern filed here is buried here. No one in this department is ever just a nurse." She thought the last line was a little much. She had not argued, because the rest of it was right, and sometimes you accepted the whole thing for the sake of the parts that were true enough to matter. That evening, just before shift change, she walked the bays. One was empty except for afternoon light, coming through the window blinds at a low angle. 2 held patients whose charts were current, and whose families had been told what they needed to know. 3 had a new admit. 61-year-old male, chest pressure, already seen, already monitored like his time meant something to someone. Bex waved her over at the charge desk, 2 ambulances inbound, 1 possible stroke, 1 fall with altered mental status. Luz handed her the marker. Willa looked at the bays, at the staff around her, some who had been there on the Hargrove night, some who had heard the story and asked to transfer in, some who just showed up for their shift and did the work without needing to know anything beyond the patient in front of them. "What do we have?" she said. And the room moved. Not because anyone was afraid of her, not because of a rank they could read or a title printed on a badge. Because on the worst night this ear had seen in years, she had stood in the center of a crisis built to humiliate her, and she had simply refused to let a single person die inside it. That was the badge no one could see and no one could take. She picked up the first chart, the doors opened, the night began again.